MagMongoSlade.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about Smackdown from October the 20th, 2023. Before we get into the news and notes, we got to do some happy birthdays. Friend of the channel, Young Search, turns 40 years old today. I've known that guy since he was 10 years old. So, happy birthday to my dog. Also, WWE Hall of Famer Snoop Dogg. I don't know how old he is. He's like 50-something. And also to one of the GOATs, Scott Hall. Today was also his birthday. Ironically, Young Search's favorite wrestler has always been Razor Ramon. So, there we go. Now we get into news and notes. Note. Lacey Evans went on, I guess it's a Mandy Rose podcast. I guess Mandy Rose has a podcast. And she was pretty full of piss and vinegar when she did this. I'm not going to go through it all, but we're going to go through enough of it that has got people chitter-chattering about her leaving WWE. So Lacey Evans said, and I quote, "Not that I give a shit to begin with. How I lasted 7 years in WWE with this same mouth is the same one backstage. I can't tell you how many damn fights I almost got into. I verbally told them every time, I'll work at McDonald's before I sit back and have anybody talk to me the way you talk to me because you feel I owe you something. The only thing I owe is working my ass off to have a good match. Back here, there is no damn way I'm going to let anybody talk to me just because you walked roads that I haven't walked. It's been a few times. Luckily, the powers that be liked me enough to, each year, I got a little more. WWE has been great to me. They've been awesome. I invested every bit of my money. I haven't taken out loans. I have investment properties, real estate. I have full business paid for. I'm in a good place because I was smart. That addiction doesn't stop. Every day, just like the power alphas that are on this podcast, every day we wake up and it's not if, it's when. And we have to be ready to fight that head on, whatever it may be. A lot of people don't have that mindset. You can tell an alpha where they may end up. It's not always the ones holding a title above their head. Sometimes it's the ones that never got to touch that shit because we are alphas. I'm not standing outside of doors anymore, waiting on answers that whoever the powers that be can't even look me in the eye and tell me. I don't have time for that. I'll be damned if I'm going to live like that and have people talk to me a certain way because they feel I don't owe anybody a damn thing because I work my ass off every day." Okay, so there's a lot of ideas in this, and you could tell she was pretty frustrated because she doesn't complete some of the thoughts, and then she dumped in a lot of other stuff. So she's kind of mad at WWE, but she's only mad at certain people, apparently. She mentioned that she got a raise every year, which means that somebody liked her. But it seems also that she didn't have friends politically because she felt like she was too busy waiting outside of doors. Now, I don't want to go there and say this seems like a Triple H issue, but it feels like a Triple H issue, I don't know what she means by how people talk to her. I mean, because that's a good question. I mean, it's also a thing that, other women have said. I think this was an issue with Trinity as well, aka Naomi, where she also said she didn't appreciate how she was spoken to. So it might have been somebody back there who is kind of gassed up on their own authority and being a bit of a dickhead and pissing people off. But, they might be in a producer or a writer or something like that. I doubt it'd be somebody with some real talent. Usually people who have super egos and attitudes have never done a damn thing. And they're in positions of power mostly due to politics. But the interesting bit is that she seemingly had an issue with maybe a veteran talent. Because she says, there is no damn way I'm going to let anybody talk to me just because you walked roads that I haven't walked. What does that mean? That's so vague. And I understand that in the wrestling business, if you don't go through the indies and all that kind of stuff, people do have attitudes. they kind of look like you haven't paid your dues. And sometimes that comes out, especially in, creative conversations and, different things like that. Is that what she's talking about in terms of, people who have walked roads she didn't walk? I don't know. And it seems like she really put a lot of emphasis on her work ethic, which also says that maybe she was being attacked for not having a work ethic. And look, from what I saw, and I saw a lot of people saying, what she got to be mad about? They tried to repackage her several times, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't seem like she's upset about the creative element. It seems like she was upset about the environment. Like there was something about the politicking backstage that she didn't care for, that she didn't like. And so I'm not looking at it as in terms of she was upset about the creative element. I'm looking at it from the perspective that she might have been upset with the kind of people who were operating backstage. And the fact she said she lasted 7 years, it seems like, when that change happened, and I think we all noticed it, there was that time when Vince was in charge and Lacey Evans was used quite often. She was on television. Even if she wasn't doing much, she was on TV. And then Triple H took over and she wasn't on TV as much. And then she says this, I'm not standing outside of doors anymore waiting on answers that whoever the powers that be can't even look me in the eye and tell me. She's waiting on answers. Waiting on answers to what? And the powers that be, well, that has changed several times, right? So it's interesting what occurs when there's an upheaval backstage in a wrestling promotion. So it seems like the politics got a little much for her and she blew up and kind of just wanted out, which makes sense. But I don't look at it from the perspective that other people are looking at it. You're looking at it in terms of she's upset about not being a champion and all that kind of stuff. But she's looking at it from she doesn't feel respected. And I understand that completely, especially since other women have left WWE and said the same thing. Most recently, of course, Naomi. Next, the Vince McMahon documentary will apparently be several parts. Bill Simmons came out and he did an interview with Jimmy Traynor on Sports Illustrated. I'm not going to read the article. I'm just going to give the summary. He basically says that there's going to be a couple of parts chopped up and that it's going to be very interesting. And he had access to Vince. And I think he also said that Vince will not have any editing authority, but he will probably get a private screening of it to see it for himself. Apparently him and Vince have a complicated relationship but he knows him personally. So it ought to be a very interesting documentary. He also was the executive producer behind the Andre the Giant HBO documentary. That was absolutely fantastic, by the way. If you're going to do a documentary on Vince McMahon, he is absolutely correct in saying that you can't do 2 hours. But him saying there's going to be multiple parts, and I guess they're going to be released far apart, because he says the first part should come out in early 2024. I'm guessing they're probably going to shoot for around WrestleMania for that. There's no doubt they're going to touch on some of the controversies, of which there are quite a few. And maybe you might even get Vince talking about the controversies, which, who knows? But it ought to be very interesting, regardless. And those things, I fully expect this Bill Simmons, Vince McMahon documentary, regardless of how people feel about Vince, is going to shatter the internet. Especially if Vince is going to be talking in his own voice about some issues that he almost never talks about. Because I'm very interested in hearing Vince talk about the Ring Boy scandal or the steroid scandal, or in defending himself against the rape accusations and stuff like that. All that stuff might be interesting. It all could be very interesting if that's the direction they're going to go in. Of course, him talking again about various other concerns of like dealing with Ultimate Warrior or Austin. Like we've seen him talk about all that kind of stuff all the time. It'd be interesting to have like 70-year-old Vince reflecting on that instead of like piss and vinegar 50-year-old Vince. So he might have like a little different take on those kinds of things. But it ought to be interesting regardless. But Bill Simmons seems like the kind of guy who Vince might actually trust, or he just might not give a shit. But I know before they seemed that they was going to give him editorial authority in the Netflix documentary, and then the whole thing with him, because he owns his own intellectual property, and he wants to be able to tell his story his way. But now it seems like they're going to re-edit the thing, or maybe do something else, and he's not going to have any kind of editorial authority. And that's probably what's taking so long for it to come out. But I want to see it regardless. He compared it to The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. I think it's going to be a little bit darker than that. It's going to be a little bit darker than that. But it ought to be fun regardless. Oh, one more thing before we get into SmackDown. Apparently, Declan McMahon, the grandson of Vince, the son of Shane, was asked about whether he watches AEW or Impact. Of course, when he responded, he doesn't watch that crap. Which, like, what did you expect him to say? What did you expect him to say? Oh, brother. I realize he's only 19. Of course, he says that he won't rule out a wrestling career because, he's a McMahon. It ought to be very interesting. Because I don't think this football thing is going to work out for him. He's a white running back. Look, I know that a lot of people are like, man, there's nothing wrong with that, but how many white running backs really make it in the NFL? Not many. You could probably name one or two if you do some Googling, but it ain't that many. And I'm not so sure being a white running back is going to be the smartest thing in the world. But it's a tough position. And if anybody can do it, the grandson of Vince can pull off being a white running back in the NFL. But I expect him to be in NXT in 2 or 3 years. He's only 19. Give him 2 years of football, and he'll probably bulk up enough to give wrestling a go. But of course, I bet people ask him all the fucking time about this kind of stuff. To ask him about AEW and Impact, like he's like some general wrestling fan. What kind of shit is that? Oh yeah. My granddad is Vince, but I'm sitting here and watching New Japan Pro Wrestling. Get the hell out of here. He's not talking about Warrior Wrestling with you marks. Like he actually going to watch Bound for Glory or some shit. He's not a wrestling fan. Are you nuts? Moving on. Let's get started with this show. Paul Heyman starts the show. LA Knight is challenging Roman Reigns at Saudi Mania. It is official via the LA Times because they can make matches now. Heyman says that he's a fan of LA Knight. He's an admirer of LA Knight. And if you're a fan or an admirer of LA Knight, you gotta watch Saudi Mania because it's going to be the last time you see him. LA Knight interrupts, tells Paul to kick rocks. Paul starts to leave. Then he changes his mind and says Paul has to stay. Because if Roman's not coming out there, then Paul has to talk to him. And he says he heard a lot of idle threats from Paul. What is Roman Reigns going to do to him? He wanted him to repeat it to his face. He said, you guys talk about warning shots. I don't do warning shots. You shoot me, you put me down for good, or I'm going to keep getting back up. And I won't stop until I win the title. So he says that Roman Reigns is scared. Say he's scared. And they have not seen anybody like him before. Interesting opening segment here. They're really putting over LA Knight strong as being the guy who is intimidating. Very interesting. Now, this was mostly all what Paul Heyman did all night. He really didn't do anything else. He was a part of the Jimmy Uso shenanigans that would take place later. But we're going to talk about that when we get there. Lashley and Dawkins are talking up Tez. They're not motivating him. Well, Dawkins is. Lashley doesn't need to motivate Ford. He's got to be self-motivating. This leads to the first match, Santos Escobar versus Montez Ford. The match ends in a distraction roll-up as Dawkins gets into a fight with the two small Latino guys outside the ring. He ends up throwing Cruz del Toro into the steps, which seems like it's the third or fourth time that's happened to him in 3 or 4 weeks. After the match, the unnamed team of Street Profits and Lashley beat up Santos Escobar before Carlito chased them all off with a chair. Carlito's theme music is god fucking awful. It has no punch to it. It has no kick to it. It's got to go. Carlito has gone on and done a couple of interviews. One of them, he said that when he left WWE way back then, I think it was 2010, he said he needed a break. He didn't need a 13-year break, and that he had no heat with WWE, and they had no heat with him. But for some reason, he was never really called to come back until Backlash. And I'm guessing it was Bad Bunny's decision, because Bad Bunny somehow was involved with this. I didn't listen to the interview, and I think he did more than one. So it might have been some interview where he said that it was Bad Bunny's idea for him to be at the show at Backlash, and that led to his big return. So, Carlito, he also prefers his own theme music, which I think a lot of guys do. How many of these older guys keep popping up like, hey, can I get my old music back? And then WWE's kind of like, nah, you gotta deal with this lifeless, soulless, heartless garbage that we gave you. This kind of Latino calypso, whatever this crap is. But the match between Santos Escobar and Montez Ford was fine. I actually liked it. Montez Ford is a guy who, they're just kind of waiting. He's in the wings. He could easily be a singles wrestler right now. They're doing a good job of keeping Dawkins around him, though. The distraction roll-up is WWE's most lethal move. It's more lethal than the Tombstone Piledriver. They've been using distracting roll-ups for at least 15 years now, and it's absolutely awful. Backstage, Rey is with Carlito, and they're checking up on Santos Escobar and the others. Rey then says that he has to go handle this Logan Paul thing because he heard Logan Paul is going to call him out. Zelina Vega, Santos, all these guys want to go with him. He's like, nah, I got this. I got to handle this one solo. So Logan Paul eventually does show up. And then he stands in the ring and he talks about beating up Dylan Dennis. I've talked about that bum before. What a bum. It was funny watching him, call Logan Paul's fiance a whore, but when you can't throw hands, you probably should not talk so much shit. Especially if you got a scheduled fight with the fucking guy. It's not like you can avoid him, Anyway, he says if he wanted real competition, he would have gotten another WWE match. And he says that Dylan Dennis is a coward hiding behind the mask of the internet. And speaking of guys who hide behind masks, then he says that he's not here to fight Rey Mysterio. He's already beaten Rey Mysterio. Then he went down about how the last time he beat Rey Mysterio, Dominic was his son. Last time he beat Rey Mysterio, LA Knight didn't even have a job. Last time he beat Rey Mysterio, I don't remember what the last thing he said was, but it didn't matter. Then he says he's not here for Rey Mysterio. But Rey has something that he wants. And he says Rey has the people's respect. He said he doesn't need the people's respect. He doesn't want it. He said Rey Mysterio has a legacy. He says, well, I have my own legacy. I don't need Rey Mysterio's legacy. He said, what I need is that United States title. So Rey comes out. Rey says that Logan Paul reminds him a lot of Dominic. They're both passionate, have amazing natural ability. They got a great career ahead of them. But both of them need to be humbled. And if he wants a shot, he'll give him the shot at Crown Jewel. And then they agree and shake hands, which was very interesting that they decided to go with a handshake rather than heat in this situation. I said it before, Logan Paul probably needs to win this title. No shade to Rey. I love Rey Mysterio is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I don't give a fuck what nobody says. I like Rey. But he doesn't need this belt. All right? And they're still, I think on Twitter, Santos Escobar is taking shots at Logan Paul. So you got a natural first match if Rey loses with Santos Escobar. So you also got the heat between Rey and Escobar you could build off of. So that's fine. I like this. Next, Pretty Deadly. They have a spa day after their successful return. They got massages and they were having their feet in hot water and all this stuff. And it was actually a mixture of terrible and good. Now, here's the terrible parts. Copious amounts of camera cuts, which makes it seem like, it's overproduced. The dialogue is shit. They're like, oh, we beat the Brawling Brutes clean. Yes, clean. Yes, clean, squeaky clean. We'll never see those guys again. And then all of a sudden, here they are. It's almost like something out of Scooby-Doo, or something out of one of those children's cartoons. You'll never see those guys again. Then, surprise, surprise, here they are. If they'd have shot this thing a lot simpler, it probably would have been so much better. But the Brawling Brutes showed up at the spa, beat up Pretty Deadly, and dunked their heads in their feet water, which is incredibly embarrassing. But it actually makes sense. Then they go off for a pint because, they're drunkards. Okay, this would have been fun if it wasn't overproduced, and I think the dialogue kind of ruined it. But I love Pretty Deadly. The Brawling Brutes are what they are. But at least they're doing something that's not in the ring, that's supposed to put over the characters and their personalities. So this works. Jimmy Uso, he's backstage talking about touchdown bloodline because he called the play, and he ran the play, and he screwed over Jay. So I don't know why is the sports references a thing now, but he started calling himself Jim Uso. Okay. he's super silly all of a sudden. But of course he's not done for the evening. John Cena then comes out there, and John Cena says he's got some harsh news today. And he's talked about Roman Reigns and Roman Reigns' championship run. He says he's got a streak of his own going. 2002 days since he last won a televised match on WWE. He has not won a match on television since 2018. And he, of course, means singles match. Then he says he's been thinking about retirement. He gets a little choked up. Says it's time to face the facts. And then the people are like, no, you still got it. No. And he did a good job of actually being choked up here. Thinking about retirement. Then he says, I believe in me. I believe in you. I believe in us. I believe in the beauty of all of this. And I believe I can still go. He threatens to smoke the next person that comes out of that curtain. He takes his shirt off, and here comes Solo Sikoa. Solo Sikoa and John Cena fight. And then Jimmy Uso attacks John Cena from behind. Then a hooded figure grabs Jimmy Uso by the leg, pulls him out. It's Jay. Jay beats up Jimmy, throws him over the barricade. It was pretty interesting, hilarious stuff. Crowd, huge pop for Jay. While Jimmy is outside the ring, beat up, he's calling for timeouts because the sports references just don't end. Producers and officials and such carry Jay away, and he ends up in the office of Nick Aldis. Nick Aldis fines Jay $10,000 for being on Smackdown when he's not supposed to be. Adam Pearce is like, well, what about Jimmy? He was on Raw. And Aldis kind of ignored that, like, I'm not responsible for Raw. Then he says, well, we're gonna end up finding Jimmy too. And then Aldis didn't care about that. And then because he was being annoying, Nick Aldis had Adam Pearce thrown out with Jey Uso. And Adam Pearce like, you're throwing me out of here? And Nick Aldis was like, yeah, I am actually. And then he was like, well, let the games begin. So we're going back to brand supremacy. But before we talk about brand supremacy, we got to talk about John Cena. This is a very interesting note to play with John Cena, is to play with the idea of John Cena's retirement. Planting that seed. Now, they're obviously not going to do it yet because there's nowhere near WrestleMania. And there's no way they're going to have John Cena retire without it being somewhere near WrestleMania season. But it was an interesting seed to plant because I had no idea that he had not won a singles match since 2018. I don't know how many singles matches he's had in that time. I think it hasn't been many, right? But he said that he hasn't won a match, and that was crazy. Like, that really blew my mind because I was like, it's been that long since he won a match. And I kept thinking about it like, I know he wrestles probably about a match or two a year. I know he lost to Austin Theory this year, and he lost to Roman Reigns last year at, I believe, Money in the Bank. So I don't remember any other singles matches in that time, but it's kind of sad. John Cena was a guy who, Super Cena. He never lost. And now he can't buy a fucking win. So it's like, it's actually a good storyline, to show, how age has turned him into a shell of himself. And he's starting to think about it, plant that seed in his mind. But then, like a typical hero, he fought through it. He was like, yeah, maybe I don't have it anymore. Maybe it's time to hang it up. And they could have played, strung that along for much longer. But then they decided, nah, we're going to have Cena respond to the audience, because the audience is not going to want Cena to retire. And Cena's gimmick is never give up, so he can't just decide, well, I can't win a match, I'm giving up, I quit. That would go against everything that he stands for. So he has to fight through it. He's got to say, I'm going to beat the next person that comes out of that curtain. And Solo Sikoa being is the right guy, I think. John Cena's 2-year feud with the Bloodline, it was coming to this, I think. Jimmy Uso would be a good opponent, but I think Solo is better because Solo could use the rub. Now, the idea of Solo losing to John Cena, I know some people are going to be bitch and moan and complain about it. I don't see a problem. I'm okay with it because we just had Solo lose to Cody not too long ago. He's lost to LA Knight. He lost to LA Knight last week. Losing to John Cena is not like losing. Cody is red hot, probably top babyface on Raw. LA Knight, top babyface on SmackDown. John Cena is a legend. It's not going to kill Solo Sikoa to lose to John Cena. But if John Cena loses to Solo Sikoa, where do we go from here with John Cena? Now, they did plant the retirement seed. They could have Solo beat John Cena, and John Cena has to retire. Now, maybe that's going to be the hook, that, if John Cena doesn't win this match, he has to retire, which would get a lot of eyeballs on the Saudi Mania show, because people would really be interested. Now, there's still an aura around Solo Sikoa, where, he's a monster, he's a machine, even though he does lose quite a bit. He's losing more than he should, probably. But it's still not a lot. It's not like he's like The Miz or anything. He takes a lot of bumps to get beat up a lot. But there's still like an aura around him. There's still a level of believability. And with that skid being in place, it's possible that Solo Sikoa could beat John Cena. I don't think so. My only issue is, what do you do with Cena if he beats Solo Sikoa? Where do we go next? Clearly, if Solo loses to Cena, you could always do the whole Roman is disappointed dad and Solo thing. And that could be the next level of their storyline. So that's one thing. All right, next is Jimmy and Jay. Maybe they won't get that match at WrestleMania. They might do it sooner. Is it possible they do Jimmy versus Jay at Crown Jewel? I would not be against that idea, but it seems like with the Nick Aldis, Adam Pearce thing, that they're going to want to keep the brand separate from what it looks like. That seems to be Nick Aldis's whole issue, is that he doesn't want Raw guys on SmackDown, and he doesn't care if Adam Pearce lets SmackDown guys be on Raw, but he certainly doesn't want Raw guys on SmackDown. And because of that, he, fined Jimmy Uso for, crossing that barrier. Now, this leads, of course, to the idea that perhaps they're going to separate those tag team titles, and we're going to go back to a tag team championship for Raw and a tag team championship for SmackDown. And then you got to ask the question, what about the women's tag team titles? Because they did a vignette for Isla Dawn and Alba Fire by saying that Chelsea Green is meddling with the curse. And, the curse remains and all this kind of stuff. And the titles will eventually belong to them. So are you going to split the men's tag team championships into two separate belts again? Which is believable and for some people favorable, because now you don't have Judgment Day on both shows, which, I cannot stand anyway. But at the same time, women's tag team titles being on both shows. And then this kind of goes back to, if you're going to have everybody's got their own slate of championships, you might as well have your own goddamn pay-per-views too. I know a lot of people attacked me for this, but I said that they probably should have, especially with Peacock, they get paid to make this content. Maybe they should go back to single brand pay-per-views. I don't know. Just throwing that idea out there. Maybe. There's pros to it. There's cons to it. I didn't hate the single brand pay-per-view era. And I was a guy who wasn't ordering the pay-per-views, but I was getting them on DVD. So, and I didn't hate. I think it allowed for a lot better storytelling. Yes, it watered down the product because there were so many pay-per-views to the point where they were competing with each other. But at the same time, it kind of made the TV a little bit better too, because if you didn't have a pay-per-view that month, maybe it was time for Raw to have a pay-per-view, then your TV got a little bit better because now you had title matches on television and stuff like that. So maybe they could do something like that where, you could get guys like Gunther on television, and then you could have the U.S. title defended on a pay-per-view. And then you can reverse that the next month, But with these infrequent Roman Reigns title run matches, you got to have something on these shows that matters, which kind of defeats the point because now you want Seth Rollins to work on those shows and defend a title. So, I don't know. Just pitching ideas. If you're going to have a completely split roster, you should probably have a completely split pay-per-view. But, never mind. I'm just pitching ideas. Now, on the subject of brand supremacy, a lot of people hated the brand supremacy idea, especially for Survivor Series. But now that it's being brought back, a lot of people are like, yeah, brand supremacy, hell yeah. And I say, look, as long as it's for something, it could be fine. But you have to add something. You have to make it interesting. I'm not sure how they managed to do that, but you got to make whatever this is interesting. If it's just a personal feud between Aldis and Adam Pearce, I guess that could be fine. I don't have a problem with that. All right. We were at 1 hour and 30 minutes. Well, 1 hour and 15 minutes into the show when we had our second match. I know a lot of AEW fans are like, what the hell? This show has been on for an hour and a half and there's only one match. The second match on the show was Grayson Waller and Austin Theory defeating Dragon Lee and Cameron Grimes. What happened to Dragon Lee all of a sudden? He was in the middle of that whole thing with the LWO when he was in NXT. He's partnered up and in the corner of Rey Mysterio and all this kind of stuff. As soon as he gets brought up to the main roster, they dump him with Cameron Grimes. What's the point of this? Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Why'd you take him out of something that could have... Look, I understand you don't want him in the LWO, and I'm glad he's not in the LWO. But why is he with Cameron Grimes? For God's sake, do something else with this kid at least. Look, I'm not against Cameron Grimes, but it's clear that Cameron Grimes isn't going anywhere, and he's not important to this roster. It's just flat out simple. Austin Theory and Grayson Waller are very good, though. I like them as a tag team. Backstage, they did an interview with Kevin Owens and Kathy Kelly where nothing of note was said, except Kevin Owens talking about all the people he had not had matches with and looking for new faces to punch and a lot of boring shit that he's talked about. But Kevin Owens sucks, bro. There's no more. I can't hold that in anymore. That guy fucking sucks. I know I have said before that I just don't like him. But now I'm just like, bro sucks. Bro's terrible. He's not good. Especially as a babyface, he's really not good. He's awful as a babyface. He hasn't really been a good heel either lately. But he's been a babyface more often than not for the last 3 years. Outside of that short run when he was a heel, feuding with Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's been mostly a heel this entire time. if you're not going to use him as one of the top heels, like he was in like 2015, 2016 maybe, then send his ass home, you know? I mean, like, I don't know, man. All the gray hair, it just seems like he just doesn't care about his physique. He doesn't care about his look. His promos are, it's a lot of winking and nodding at the audience, and it's a lot of cute verbiage, but it's nothing, no content to it. I can't fucking stand this guy. And every time I see him on my screen, I'm just reminded of how shitty he is. God, get this fucking guy out of here, man. He fucking sucks. I don't like Kevin Owens, dog. I'm sorry. He is the Eddie Kingston of WWE. He seems to have tremendous potential. And he has some ability in terms of being in the ring. You know, he works stiff. Some of his stuff is pretty good. Back when he was really an interesting heel, when he first came into NXT in his later days in Ring of Honor, he seemed to have passion. And there was, you know, when he was feuding with John Cena, that was something good about Kevin Owens. That was good. There was something interesting about that. And now he's just an also-ran. He's a guy who doesn't care about shit anymore. And he's so successful that it doesn't matter anymore. And like, how could you criticize him? And I say, look at it and say, man, I see nothing but wasted potential when I look at Kevin Owens. With his body type, the kind of style he should be working, oh man, he could be doing so much more in terms of being a brawler, an ass kicker. But he wants to do swanton bombs and moonsaults. Get the fuck. Come on, man. Beat it. Main event of the evening, only the third match on the entire 2-hour show. Io Sky versus Charlotte Flair. The finish was very good. Charlotte hit a spear on Io. Actually, it was Lashley's spear that she stole. After she countered the moonsault. She got a 2 count before Bayley put Io's foot on the rope. Charlotte got pissed off, went out there, beat up Bayley, threw her all over the place. She gets back in the ring. She goes full edge in the corner, and she tries to spear Io again, only for Io to have been wearing the title at the time. So Charlotte rammed her own head into the belt, and she gets pinned 1, 2, 3. Io Sky wins. Pretty good match. It wasn't the great match that it could have been, I think. Io took a hell of a lot of bumps in here. Charlotte did a top rope Samoan drop, which was a hell of a bump that she took. And it was a fun match, you know, for a women's main event. It was fun. I didn't hate it. But it does seem to me like Charlotte is like a step or two behind where she was a couple of years ago. She's trying different things in the ring. And you could tell she's actually trying different things. So it was a good match because Charlotte doesn't really have shitty matches. Not that often anyway. So this was actually pretty good. After the match, Charlotte Flair is jumped by Damage Control, which for some reason does not include Dakota Kai, who doesn't do anything in these shows. She just shows up. She gets paid to just appear, I guess. Then Bianca Belair comes out there. She saves Charlotte, runs off Damage Control, and she helps Charlotte to her feet. So Asuka, who, Charlotte has been running to the rescue of, does nothing. And Bianca, who hasn't been there in over a month, shows up to make the save. Considering Bianca lost the title in the Money in the Bank situation, that clearly is where we're going with this, where Bianca is going to end up being the top challenger because she never got a rematch. She's probably going to end up having to wrestle Bayley or something like that in order to get in contention. But Io versus Bianca either at Saudi Mania, which is Crown Jewel, or whatever comes afterwards. But I'm guessing that she's going to be brought in to do the Saudi Mania show, which is fine because she's been off TV for a while, so it's not like she's overexposed. So I'm okay with Io versus Bianca in a straight up match at Crown Jewel. Speaking of Bianca, I don't know if you guys have seen the new Slim Jim commercials that feature Bianca Belair and LA Knight. Now, before I get into, I'm not going to review the commercial or anything like that. I'm just going to get my thoughts on it. LA Knight is the new pitch guy for Slim Jim. Apparently, everything Slim Jim is going to have LA Knight involved. He's going to drive around a Slim Jim car. He's going to have a Slim Jim match. He's going to be in the commercials. He's going to wear the colors, everything. They're really going hard with Slim Jim and LA Knight. And that's a good thing for him. It's great for his career, if you're being honest, because, you know, Slim Jim is obviously a pretty good partner for WWE, so it works out. Bianca, however, being in that spot looks very weird. It looked very over the top. Whenever I see Bianca in commercials, not only do I smile sometimes because, again, she's the stone that the builder refused in terms of Triple H didn't want anything really to do with her when she was in NXT. And you see all of her success is basically because Vince gave her a chance, where Triple H basically was like, oh, Kyrie is the one. Shayna Baszler, oh yeah, she's the one. Not, you know, Bianca. Anyway. But the new commercials, the new Slim, whenever I see a wrestler do a Slim Jim commercial, and it's not Randy Savage, I am put back into when I was 12 or whatever I was, when the Slim Jim commercials rolled out and it was Bam Bam Bigelow and it was Diesel. And I was just like, man, that's weird. It's not that they're terrible at it. It's just that you're not Randy Savage. And it's like asking those folks to put on that suit and be sort of the face of Slim Jim when Randy Savage is such a irreplaceable voice and character that is synonymous with Randy Savage. You're asking a lot. You know, you're asking a lot. Now, here it is 30 years later. And I'm still talking about the Slim Jim commercials and how nobody can compare to Randy Savage's energy, his passion, his intensity for dried meat jerky. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, it means something. This meant something. We used to be a proper country where we had a roided up psycho. Snap it to a Slim Jim. Oh yeah. You know, that was amazing. And then out of nowhere they thought, Kevin Nash can fucking do it with his dry sense of humor. You know, no, I'm not sure. Look, I may like me some LA Knight. I do. I like LA Knight. I love the Bianca Belair. But I ain't so sure nobody can replace Randy Savage. So maybe they'll do fine, but I'm not huge on wrestlers doing the Slim Jim commercials. That's just me. All right, so SmackDown was mostly good, I think. LA Knight, Paul Heyman was very good. Logan Paul was pretty good again. Interesting decision for him and Rey to not have any heat. John Cena was amazing, of course. Everything that set up something was good. The matches, however, the first match on the show, Lashley and LWO, they're still doing their thing. Okay. The second match on the show, however, I failed to see where that's going. Like, we're Dragon Lee feuding with Austin Theory and Grayson Waller. Where is that going? I don't know. Like, clearly Theory and Waller, they just had a tag team title match and lost, but clearly you could always go that route with them. Why is Dragon Lee with Cameron? I don't know. The women's championship, of course, is very important and going to be moving forward because, you know, EO is a Triple H project. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Jimmy Uso is now the quarterback again because Roman Reigns isn't there. So he's calling the plays. He's making the decisions. He's scanning the field. He's making the reads. He's throwing the tight spirals all of a sudden. But I wonder if he's giving the sportsman butt taps. I hope not. Don't tap anybody on the butt, Jimmy. Jimmy Uso being delusional and not realizing that Paul Heyman and Solo Sikoa both hate him. And that Roman is only, you know, being nice to him right now. That's actually the sort of storyline that they're going with here. Jimmy has basically forced himself back into the bloodline. And because they haven't forgotten or forgiven him, nobody has really. He basically forced himself back in. He's being mistreated. He keeps trying to give dap to Solo and Solo is not with it. He keeps trying to call Paul OG and talk to him about stuff. And Paul's kind of like, I don't know what's going on. And Jimmy's being a doofus. He's trying to ingratiate himself into the bloodline by doing all of this stuff, like, calling the shots and everything. But he also gave himself a leadership position, which nobody agreed to, which is, like, just everything is happening because Jimmy Uso decided this was going to happen this way. When Roman's not around, he's in charge, but he's also being silly. And he was being silly last week too. So it's very interesting watching them really take the Jimmy Uso character and try to find a place for him where he's not fully in the bloodline, but he's willing to do the bidding of the bloodline because he wants to be the next tribal chief. So at least that's what it looks like to me. So it ought to be very interesting to see how far they plan to take this thing, because the Uso story is basically one where Jay is trying to get out and Jimmy is pulling him back in, even though, when Jimmy was out, he tried to pull Jay out. So when Jay wanted to be in the bloodline and stand next to Roman and all this stuff, Jimmy wanted him out. But now Jay wants to be on his own, live his own life, take care of his own affairs, be his own man. And Jimmy's trying to pull him back in. So not being able to escape toxic family and toxic family situations is becoming sort of a theme when it comes to Jey Uso specifically. And he has been the heart of this storyline since the beginning of it in, 2020 or 2021, when the whole bloodline thing started. It's been mostly about the manipulation of Jey Uso. When Jay tries to do things for himself and he keeps hitting a brick wall. The brick wall initially was Roman, because he wanted to be, why can't I be the tribal chief? And then you had, the Jimmy Uso didn't want him to be Roman's bitch. And now he wants to be his own man because Jimmy kind of pushed him in that direction of leaving the bloodline. Now he goes to Raw, tries to be his own man, and the bloodline are still involved in his life because he can't get away from them. This is, of course, going to lead to him eventually having to really have a match with Jimmy. The question is, when is it going to happen? But unserious, hilarious Jim Uso is one of my favorites. I like this. It's a lot better than him trying to be super serious because it's showing a lot more of his personality. And it's also it's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It kind of takes you by surprise because he was never really the personality in the Usos. It was always Jay. So now Jimmy is starting to really wake up, and I'm enjoying it very much. Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce. I wanted to see where this is going, because it seems like they're going to set Nick Aldis up to be the heel here. He fined Jey Uso for just appearing on SmackDown and causing a little bit of chaos. Not even a lot of chaos, just a little bit. And that's cost him 10 racks. And he got people putting their hands all over him. So SmackDown is still a pretty good show. The building was packed. They legit sold out. Again, apparently Survivor Series is also legit sold out. And even though there's a lot of rumors that, Phillip Brooks is going to be appearing at WWE Survivor Series, and even though there's been quite a few articles saying that he's not going to be there, look, I'm done speculating over what WWE should bring CM Punk in or not. To me, it doesn't matter. I agree with most people who say that they don't really need him. The only reason they would sign him is to keep him away from, Tony Khan, or to piss Tony Khan's eye. But ultimately, I think that they're doing good business right now. I wouldn't add anything that might be a negative to it. If CM Punk is open to returning, wait until business starts to slide again, I guess, then you would bring him in. There's always money in a big return, unless you piss it away. There's always money in a big return. Somebody that everybody knows or people are interested in, there's always going to be that element of, oh, hell yeah, I wonder what they're going to do. But then you have to think about 6 months later, a year later. I know everybody's going to be thinking about, oh, the pop is Survivor Series. Yeah, the pop. Yeah, that would be great because it's Chicago. But what are you going to do when you go to Des Moines, Iowa, or piss up a rope Virginia or something like that, and you still got this fucking guy on the roster soaking up all this money. What's going to happen then? Unless you're going to run Chicago every other weekend like AEW did, what more can you get out of a one-night pop? Really think about this. But in WWE, again, they're doing pretty well in terms of attendance right now, and they're selling a bunch of merch and gimmicks and shit. They don't really need CM Punk. But it's still an interesting talking point. The hell, they got me talking about it right now. Still, Smackdown, good show. Very interesting storytelling here. It seems that they're leading to Jimmy and Jay fighting sooner than WrestleMania, which might be fine with me. I'm cool with them fighting in Saudi Mania and maybe doing a rematch in Philadelphia. So that all could be very interesting. But what do you guys think? Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later.